We heard lots of fascinating stuff this morning about where the market might be going. We've seen more bar charts, scatter charts, plots, and interesting diagrams, which have illuminated, I would suggest, some parts of the problem. But now, this is the panel where we're really going to tell you what happens next. So the panel has been given the slightly odd title, if I can flick, of The Rise of the Disruptor. And I thought there might be more than one disruptor, so I've helpfully added an S in brackets. But the exam question that we're going to try and tackle is, quote, how will the growth of subscription OTT services impact the European pay-TV market? And to answer this wonderful question, we've got an august panel who are currently sitting in a totally different order to this order we have here. So, to get the ball rolling, we're going to work our way down the panel, and we're going to get them to tell us who they are, what they do in relation to OTT, briefly. And then to answer this first question, where are we? What has really changed since 2010, say, to pick an arbitrary date? So, Anette, why don't you get us going? Who are you, what do you do, and what's really changed?
So my name is Anette Schaefer. I'm an independent consultant, but I was, until recently, responsible for the TV business in Central and Eastern Europe for Deutsche Telekom. That means everything outside of Germany. So these are 13 countries, and we're around about 5 million customers who are watching television over IPTV, cable, satellite, and DVB-T. And also we started deploying OTT services. The reason for that is, first of all, was that we have reached in most markets our number one or number two. And so we had to increase our addressable market. So we offered people, without having an access product from a bundle, they can watch television over end screens. But also we wanted to attract more people with sports content. So this was one of the initiatives, was to sell sports in smaller, say, pieces and chunks. So you don't have to go for a full subscription. And I think this was what we have done, where we tried to do from our own content and acquisitions and bundles. But I think the other big change is that we're now aggregating more content from Netflix, from Amazon, from HBO in the region. And that's a big challenge and a big change. And I have to say that OTT in the markets that I was responsible for hasn't made that huge of an impact yet.
Right.
For various reasons. First of all, price. In countries where you have an ARPU that's less than 10 euros, people can't afford Netflix or something similar. The strong footprint of HBO, I would say, is also a factor why people haven't maybe not looked into OTT. And also the language.
Right.
So we have seen it on a linear side. We have seen many linear international partners who haven't dubbed the programming in the countries. Same accounts for the US majors like Netflix and Amazon. I think it will change now in Poland this year, but in general, I think the audience was not so willing to buy it or to watch it.
So summarising brutally then, so for Deutsche Telekom, it's mostly been pretty good. It's driven demand for broadband, there's more flexibility, you can offer different types of packaging at a cheaper price, and there's not been much disruption yet.
Yeah.
Summarising.
Yeah.
Okay, Guy, I'm sure you can get a slightly different perspective. Obviously, you've spoken a little bit earlier about what you see as happening. If you had to summarise it really brutally, the last 10 years, how much change have we really seen?
To summarise it briefly, everything has changed and nothing has changed. But let's just think about the everything, first of all. Clearly, we have streaming players that did not exist. And more than that, we have an awful lot of them now. Secondly, we have a number of concepts it's easy to forget that did not exist and are now accepted within the media and the consumer landscape as a given. Binge viewing, for example. Box sets, straight to box set for a TV show. SVOD originals, the sort of budgets, the high-end dramas that we're seeing, all of this is brand new, and it's been instigated by the shifts created by the streaming players, by Netflix, but also by others. So yes, everything has changed. But as those who were here this morning will have seen, I think a lot of the way that we need to think about the business, the way that the revenue models work, the way that the relationships between what is a channel and a platform and what is aggregation, etc., that actually hasn't changed. It's just that we haven't got to the stage in the thinking where we've married the two back together again, and that's where we'll be heading next.
That's a lovely, pithy summary of this morning. Ben, a new voice in the discussion. How much has really changed? And first of all, what do you do?
My name is Ben McOwen-Wilson, and I'm the Regional Director for YouTube in Europe, Middle East and Africa, specifically looking after what I described actually to Dan earlier as the beer drinking portion of Europe. So UK, Benelux, the Nordics, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and then Sub-Saharan Africa. So there you go. Not the spirit drinking portion and not the wine drinking portion. I've been there for 8 years in various roles, originally looking after the UK business. What has changed? Actually, probably echo and try and build a little bit on what Guy said, which is everything and nothing. Everything has changed. Everything, and I want to answer the what has changed from a consumer's point of view. You know, everything has changed because from a consumer's point of view, finally the promise that internet delivery of television can bring about has become a reality. So whether it's about content with an amazing array of content of all manner of cost curves to it, whether it's very expensive high-end original dramas all the way through to, which our platform carries a lot of, kids doing makeup in their bedrooms or football tricks out in the park. So content, the world of content has changed and is evolving massively. The second piece is hardware. 10 years ago, 2010, the hardware just didn't work. It didn't feature. Now, today, so many of the screens are pre-installed with an internet connection or will automatically be connecting to your Wi-Fi. And then thirdly, the software and what we're seeing there, and obviously, I guess from a YouTube perspective, we do a huge amount of work both in trying to ensure we've got distribution to hardware that's out there and building software in the forms of apps, whether those are on your phones and tablets that you can cast to your TV devices, or building straight into actually many of the people's systems who are in the rooms today to make sure that consumers can access the content wherever they want. So I think from a consumer's point of view, everything has changed. Where nothing has changed, I think it's really about, again, as Guy said, which is nothing has quite solidified. And actually, I think I haven't got much in terms of positivity to say about that in terms of the short term, because I don't think it's going to solidify. I think we're very much at the early stage of this change. I think we're at the dawn of this rather than the evening or the sunset of all of this change. And I think hopefully we'll get to talk a lot about how do you keep yourself open and relevant depending on where those pieces fall going forward.
I think in a sense you're saying we're at the end of the beginning. We've laid the foundations for a much more disruptive, complex market. Now we need to see how that market develops.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, who are you, what do you do, and how much change has Viacom seen?
Yeah, so I'm Dan Fahy. I work at Viacom. In the UK, that includes Channel 5, but also Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, and MTV. The territories I work across with some colleagues who are here today is the UK, Nordic, Central Eastern Europe, and Russia. And I guess from
beer and spirits.
Pardon? Yeah,
mix of beer and spirits.
Yeah.
More fun parties.
So from our point of view, looking at that question, I guess the latter part of the period since 2010, you're seeing what we're seeing is an unbundling of the pay TV system a little bit. You look in the mature markets and you look at Sky, for example, they've unbundled their mid-tier pack into more bolt-on packs. If you look across the market, Kids is fundamentally an unbundled package now, except for Virgin, which may head that way. So that's changed. But then at the same time, there's been a rebundling or a reaggregation. So Netflix onto Virgin, Netflix on Sky now TV on BT, Amazon Prime on BT, BT Sport on Sky. So there's sort of this rebuilding of the bundle. And from our point of view, there's opportunities in that for content owners and broadcasters. And another market where this has happened a lot is the Nordics markets. And they're, as we saw from slides earlier, heavily SVOD penetrated. And in that market, we worked with our partners there, the major operators, Telenor, Canal Digital, Comhem, UC, to launch Paramount Plus, which is us bringing in from our studio, film and TV studio, Paramount, bringing in the first pay window into an on-demand environment with our own programming from Comedy and MTV. That's a bundle that has gone into their extended basic tier to sort of defend that unbundling. So, for us, a lot's changed, but actually a lot of it still looks the same and is healthy. And in fact, it's opened up new ways for us to work with our partners.
And generally positive from a point of view of a major content creator. do you see at this point?
Yes, I think for us, we own and produce nearly all our own programming. That gives you the versatility to move with these shifts and work with your partners in different ways. That's paramount. If you didn't have that, it's much harder. That's what's let us work with our partners in the Nordics and in other markets in Europe as well.
Okay, Bruce.
Hi, my name is Bruce Mann. I'm Chief Content Officer for Liberty Global. Most of you know who Liberty Global is, so I won't bore you with that. My remit is evolving, and I'll tell you why in a second, with my 3 prongs that I oversee are a centralized group that would handle multinational and some local content renewals and acquisition deals. And as you know, or you may not know, there's a significant level of divestiture going on in our business where we're reshaping our portfolio. And some of those responsibilities and roles are shifting. And that group is moving more to a partnership type of environment and looking towards how do we exist in the new environment. We also have a planning function, which is kind of operational strategy. Somebody comes in and helps think about propositions, the bigger deals, value for content, those type of issues. And then the latter, or the third prong of the stool, is I oversee a content investment group. As we go through this process now, and we're divesting some of our countries, provided the regulators play nicely, we're going to have somewhere in the vicinity of $16 billion in cash to redeploy. So the content investment side is really an exciting place to be. So actually, we're pretty optimistic about where the world's going. It's just certainly an interesting shift for a company like Liberty Global. Getting to your question, to me, if you go back 10 years, I'm of the camp that everything's changed, okay? There's 2 seismic things that happened approximately 10 years ago. One was the introduction of the iPhone, and that is forever and a day. There isn't one person in this room that hasn't checked your iPhone during presentations today, looked at it, you live on it, you live and breathe it, and it's also made content totally portable. And that'll never change, that'll never come back, and screen size is changing, et cetera. But this isn't a phone conference, so we won't go on about that. The second thing that happened is Netflix began streaming. And 15 years ago, 14 years ago, 13 years ago, those guys were sitting around designing envelopes to send DVDs out. Now they're kind of the bunny and the dog race when it comes to the entire industry, and it's fascinating. So they have come in, and the impact that streaming has had, in my view, has hit all areas of the entertainment food chain. When you come to networks and broadcasters and thematics, I would never use this opportunity to renegotiate, but I mean, the value of these businesses have been dramatically impacted because viewership's harder to amass, fragmentation. You're getting very big viewership and usage out of people that just weren't in the mix not too many years ago. And it's forever altered those broadcasters' games, and they're being forced to innovate and look at new models and change, and it's really changed them, and it'll change them forever. The second leg of the stool is the creative industry. I mean, the studios were the majors. They drove the way things happened. They would create once and publish often. They were very judicious on the way they sold rights. They controlled so much, and also they had access to the best creatives. They just ran things, and now you have a total shift in the power and in the model away because the guy that had the biggest check isn't a major. And he got sick, and those guys got sick of the restrictions, so they figured they'll go do it themselves. And that's also impacted the production business because we're invested in production businesses. So the good news is these other companies will pay a lot up front and pay a premium to get something, but it kills our secondary market. So everything's changing, and they're sucking the best creatives out of the market because everybody wants to go there. Though there's some newer shifts starting to happen, but I don't want to wax on that too long. And then the third stool is pay TV guys. Now, the good news for us is we're able to aggregate on, and bring in the Netflix, et cetera. That's all great, and it gives us a little bit of margin, brings the content with us. But the biggest hit, I think, for our industry is that we always had the luxury, particularly in the US, add a little content, goose the rate, and be able to build our revenues and grow that business. And Netflix's proposition in particular came in and had such an aggressive, low-cost price. It's such a desirable price-value relationship. Our ability to grow the rate has really changed. So we can't pay as much for what we used to have. We're changing our business. We're we're moving away, not moving away from video, but really evaluating our business as well. So I think the changes are dramatic.
What a fascinating set of perspectives, because you all have a slightly different spin in it, obviously. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice slowly. But I feel like you've painted a really compelling picture of where we are. I now have a set of questions which really are just designed to help us understand the landscape. And because Ben used to be an ex-consultant, I thought we should start with him on this one. So I kind of call this the who's meant to be aggregating who question. How do all these bits fit together? So OTT is a sort of phrase which covers a multitude of sins and evils. We've got businesses which are very specifically platforms and they're building services on top of them. We've got people like Netflix who have a rather different model. Ben, can you help us just make sense of how these bits fit together, both with one another, and then just to make the question a little bit harder, in the wider TV ecosystem as well?
So
your time starts now.
Asking me to go back to a job that I did with John 15 years ago. What I'm actually going to do is answer it from a YouTube perspective, which might be something that I can more uniquely bring to this panel, which is, I guess from our perspective, we are trying to ensure, as we see this fragmentation going on, and as we see new aggregators emerging at a number of levels, we want to ensure that our users, 1.9 billion of them every month around the world, get access to YouTube in a way that's best designed for the surface that they're using at that particular point in time. So the television screen or the mobile screen. And for that reason, we've put a lot of effort into building out, in the context of television, our living room experience. An experience that optimizes YouTube for that living room. That experience is available on over 500 million devices today. And that accounts for 180 million hours of viewing each day. So this isn't something that's going to happen. This is something that's already happening, even for a service that might feel as alien to those of you who think you know what television is, as YouTube. And I think that it's an incredibly complicated space where you have those relationships are with OEMs, they're with the operators, they're with aggregators, some of whom have come out of operators, aggregators, some of whom were never operators and have begun their journey from an entirely different place and have a different set of criteria. But I think what we're doing, and maybe this goes to what success looks like for anybody in this market, what we're doing is focusing on what do we believe is important for us. We haven't nailed our colors to a single revenue model. We are predominantly an ad-funded business. We've launched a subscription business, which is largely speaking music. I know we've been trying to steer away from that, but it's largely speaking driven by a music business. And we are then seeking to ensure that we get distribution through the widest possible array of partners in a way that works both for us and we hope for those partners.
And YouTube is a slightly unusual platform because it supports a range of different business models. And Guy put up a slide earlier, I think before you arrived, suggesting we can think about this essentially as platforms versus channels or products, and then premium, and then you call it general. I like to think of it as subprime. Is that a sensible description from your point of view?
So
it's platforms and things that run on them.
Yeah, platforms,
premium, and then
platforms and things that run on them is a good decision. I think premium and the other stuff I think is probably not as complicated as we see it. I think we see it as being more complicated than that. One of the kind of very small portions of our revenue at the moment comes from something that's called channel memberships, which is it allows the owner of a YouTube channel to themselves bundle together and fix a price point for any array or portion of content plus ancillary services via our platform. So some people who are using that are, as an example of a musician, a music composer in Sweden who is using that for unique early access to the content that he's writing. He's one of the most successful in terms of, if you like, relative revenues from that versus revenues he's making from ads on our product. At the other extreme, we've got traditional pay television partners who are looking at that as a way to build out access. So globally, the biggest example of that would be WWF. who are using it, because that tends to be a sport that hasn't always had the carriage that it would like to have had in every market, but has got a small niche audience globally. So enabling that on the platform, I think, and I don't know whether, I think that probably sits between, I don't know whether that's premium or general, I can't remember what the distinction was, but that is saying.
And that's the interesting about the platforms you're describing, that they support a range of different business models. Mm-hmm. Right, we've done the platform bit. We're happy with Guy's description. It all works. Let's move on. Next question then. I thought, Bruce, you might want to have a go at this one, as you obviously run or work for a subscription business. What are we really learning about what drives take-up of these services? What's the secret sauce? Is it very straightforward, as I
think it's very straightforward. I don't think it's any unique perspective through somebody that does what we do.
Sure.
Probably more so in my past life when I ran networks, et cetera. But I mean, the guys or gals or entities here that are successful are people that have built very clear, clean brand propositions, people who have distinctive, unique, highly desirable content, people who market well, people who have invested in content and exclusivity. It's kind of like TV 101. These guys have just really done a great job and not charged a lot of coin. And they found white space, and also they took chances and innovated through things like binging instead of the programmer managing the shelf space. I'm going to give you one ep a week and you better be there at 8:30. I mean, it's just, so they've just done everything right.
And Annette, you've just been building one of these things for Deutsche Telekom. You look staggered.
No, I'm not staggered. I think.
No. So do you agree? I mean, is it easy to overcomplicate this? But the bottom line is they're great products which deliver exclusive content, which cuts through and people really want. Is there anything more complicated about it than that?
And they use data really well.
And the data, yeah. So I think that's to adding what Bruce said, is that the advantage is that they know more about their consumer than everybody else. So maybe traditionally in the pay TV business, we're not good in really keeping up with all the data models or business intelligence, whatever you want to call it. I think it's now the pay TV operators really try to keep up and engaging with more specialized video asset management systems, whatever's out there, data. But I was a little bit more, with my intro, was a little bit more, I say, careful, because I see differences in the markets. So I agree with everything but what's been said here when it comes to Western Europe. But I said there's big parts of the planet that we call emerging market. Also, I have worked in my previous life for operators in Pakistan and other remote areas where Netflix is a nice to have, but it's an expat community of 5,000 that watches that, and the rest of the
so there's going to be variation about the content that drives take-up.
But I think what's interesting is what role you want to play in this world, and that goes back to the operators. Whether the operators have to aggregate all of these OTTs, plus they have their own channel lineup, they have the local channels that they need to provide. The question is, it's getting more and more complex, and the question is, what is the business model and how far you want to go?
Let's turn to the business model bit then, Dan.
Yeah. Can I just add a bit?
Fire away.
So I think one of the other characteristics of the OTT subscriptions is they're cheaper and they're 30-day contracts generally.
Yeah.
And flexible.
So so content becomes a much bigger and more prominent factor in decision making. So a lot of these subscriptions tend to spike around certain content and come off against around certain content, which is different to your pay TV models. So in that environment, standout hit programming has a much bigger influence over subscription. So we've seen that with our partnership with Now TV on MTV. Big programs there drive a lot of acquisition. Comedy Central tends to help reduce churn. So there is a lot around that, and related to that is your ability to market and do social marketing is much more of a driver of impulse purchase on OTT subscriptions than cable bundles and things like that.
Let's talk about what we've learned about the economics of these services, of running a direct-to-consumer subscription service. You've obviously, Viacom's got some experience in this space and some skin in the game. What have you learned about the economics of these services?
Yeah, so it's evident that for these OTT subscription services, if there are broader business benefits sitting behind it, then that makes your cost of acquisition much more efficient. So the businesses that have other business lines to wrap under this tend to be the ones that can invest more and do well. what we've been doing with those businesses is helping produce OTT products that let them sell other ancillary products into it. So case in point, in the Nordics, Paramount Plus is being repurposed into OTT packs to help sort of broadband tariffs. Nick Play is also being used. It's a Nickelodeon Kids brand app. It's being used as a companion app on a point system for UC in Denmark. If you're taking broadband and mobile, you get access to a whole range of new OTT services. Even in the UK, we're seeing with the launch of MTV Play, our new DTC SVOD service, that's being used by EE to sort of reward recontracting a new mobile tariff.
And you talk, we'll come back to this. You're very much taking a kind of affiliate route, i.e. you're predominantly selling through third parties.
Yeah, we think, well, if there's a way we can pair some benefits to our audience with benefits to our partners, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll pursue.
Bruce, different take?
Well, I think it's difficult when you bundle them in saying OTT services.
Sure.
Because the first filter is, are they pure play? And that's what they are? Or are they a vertically bundled entity that feeds a different set of metrics? So for example, a Netflix is a pure play, balls to the wall. That's what they do. Warner Media, for example, is AT&T is looking for an ability to try to use content to lower their wireless churn and help their acquisition. And if they're able to lower their churn by 1%, that whole acquisition just works, and they have no modest international aspirations. Amazon, as you know, their Prime business is valued in hundreds of billions of dollars, and that's why they're in the business. If they could make a little coin through Amazon Prime, that's great, but it's about driving their mothership. At Disney Fox, for them, it's survival. They really have to come back and reposition themselves because of where we began the conversation, where their world's just been changed. And they have to adapt.
It's a valid point. What you're resolving for, that's the big question with OTT. I mean, we have seen in many markets where we have mobile-only carrier, where Netflix on us was a proposition to retain mobile customers. So it's really the business model that drives the relationship and also the purpose. And as Bruce said, the Warner pays off only to yield the mobile customers.
Guy, you were quite bullish about the Netflix business model earlier, and particularly talking about the impact of price rises. Are these generally attractive business models? I mean, a lot of analysts, I'd have to say, are quite bearish on the impact of Disney Plus on Disney's performance over the next few years. It's going to be a very expensive game for lots of companies to pull off, isn't it? Go on, vent. You want to be beat.
I think there are two ways to look at it. So clearly a traditional business going direct is cannibalizing itself. Now there's an argument for being better to cannibalize yourself than have someone else do it. Putting that aside, we're not talking about an overnight transition for Disney. They will protect their affiliate business in strong markets for some considerable time to come. We did a fairly simplistic model, and it was simplistic, so definitely back of the envelope, to look at over a 10-year period, what do they have to do at a realistic price point for a direct consumer service to replace their affiliate business completely. And the answer is, and I'll cut straight to the point, 140 million subscribers, which doesn't sound too bad.
I think I'm right, but in its peak ever year of subscriber acquisition in the US market, Netflix put on 6 million subs.
Yeah. Well, Netflix hit 140 million in 11 years. So if they grow at the same rate of Netflix, they will replace their at a $7.50 price point. And that's an ARPU, so don't forget they've got ESPN, they've got Disney Plus, Hulu and other things. Then they will completely make up for 100% cannibalization of their affiliate business. Now, that sounds achievable to me, because my starting thesis was, this is idiotic. But the spreadsheet said, it's not quite so idiotic. So,
from a YouTube point of view, when you think about this, my sense is it can be simplified. We have a small number of big things which are going to be extremely expensive and are going to cost billions of dollars to roll out globally with very high-end premium content, a la Netflix. And presenting that to your shareholders is going to be an interesting experience. And then we have a whole universe of very small things some of which can be incredibly successful, but they're only ever going to be micro businesses. They're SMEs. Occasionally one will sort of flare up and go
I don't know about the big
big.
SMEs. I think actually I'd back what Anette was saying, which is in individual markets, I think there's going to be very different dynamics. And I think that's actually where the interesting story is going to play out, is in which markets have people, for their own market dynamics, moved early enough to ensure there's a credible, sustainable future for them alongside some of these big global players. Now TV in the UK, it strikes me, probably launched 2 years before they really, really needed to. And as a result, are in a place where I would guess they're a sustainable business. BritBox in the UK, I declare an interest. I drew the idea for Kangaroo version 1 on the back of a napkin in the Electric Cinema, and I was the chairman who took it through and failed to get it through the Competition Commission here in the UK, but that was 11 years ago. 11 years ago, it was I'll say it myself, a work of genius. But bringing it back now, when the market dynamics around you have changed to the extent that that is a much more challenging proposition to try and get away, if you even get regulatory approval for it second time around. And they tried it the big broadcasters tried it in Germany. And I think this is one of the things that we haven't yet seen how it will play out, which is how will local regulators behave around these. Essentially, competition law in Europe prevented us having a European-based Netflix.
And can I just table one view that I do hear occasionally? That there are certainly people who would argue we're right in the middle of a massive OTT hype bubble, and that the only really successful service, from a sort of global point of view, is Netflix, which is by far the largest from a subscriber acquisition point of view. But it's losing billions and billions of dollars. And there are lots of small things, some of which make money, but they're very small. They're 10, 20, 30.
I think it depends what you mean by
Sure.
OTT. I mean, if what we mean by OTT businesses, video businesses not being delivered by linear satellite or linear cable, then I don't think it's a bubble at all.
Okay.
I think it's just the future, and it's arriving probably at a pace that none of us could have anticipated 3 or 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago.
That's good to hear. So then a final question, just to set the scene. I'm going to start with Guy and then go to Bruce on this one. If you had to summarise brutally, how has the last 10 years, the growth of OTT of services like Netflix, impacted investment in TV and video content? Is this stuff all additive? Are we seeing a huge boom in spending, or actually are we just moving piles of cash around?
Well, in terms of content, I think, yes, we are seeing a huge boom in spending.
There's more money.
Budgets are going through the roof. There's just the drive for quality that did not exist 10 years ago is fundamentally different for TV drama. Demand for TV drama is fundamentally different. And everyone, again, says that's a bubble as well, but it's a bubble that never seems to burst. And it's going up and up and up. So yes, there's been a fundamental shift in content investment.
Bruce, are you same page? This one's easy.
Reasonably, except you have Europe up there, and
Sure.
I don't think the impact's been dramatic in Europe. In the US, it clearly has.
Been more measured.
And the other thing that's probably been more dramatic, which is not OTT driven, has been the inflation in sports.
That's exactly.
So there's a lot of coin going to sports, and there's a lot that's gone into high quality drama.
Yeah.
Okay, right, ladies and gentlemen, now a word of warning. We have set the scene, but we're now going to move into part of the discussion, which is about the future. At the end of this section, we have a quiz where we're going to be asking you a set of questions about the future, and then the panel are going to tell you if you are right or wrong. So I would strongly recommend you pay attention to the next 20 minutes or so. So first question, I thought we should ask this one of, why don't we start with you, Guy. How much more growth in subscription OTT take-up are we going to see in Western Europe during the next 5 years? Double? Triple? How many more subscriptions?
52%.
50%, there you go.
So the important thing about that is it's not 100%, right?
Right.
So 52% going from about 74 million subscriptions to 114 million, if I remember the figures correctly. At least that's what Ampere markets data says.
Which is probably right, therefore.
Well, of course.
Sorry, can I just ask, are you saying households who are subscribing to an OTT service,
That is
or number of services being taken?
I'm thinking of the number of individual subscriptions is what I'm interested in.
However,
Going higher.
Higher.
the number of households is slightly lower growth than that. Similar, but slightly lower.
And you're expecting an increase of the ARPU as well?
Yes, not,
Okay.
not massive, but yes, an increase in the ARPU as well.
Ben, you're doing that interesting eyebrow thing, which makes me think you disagree slightly.
I think it'll be, if you're looking at it, I would have said that, I'd have guessed you'd have said that around the number of households. That feels probably right. But I think it will probably be higher than that in terms of the number. I think because we haven't really seen any wave of serious competition in the volume of OTC services, and we're seeing it now in the UK with BritBox and others, and I think there'll be many more with Disney and others. I would have expected you to say, I'm not going to argue with Guy because he knows more than me.
Actually, you're absolutely correct. And the reason is what that doesn't take into account is services that haven't launched yet. So that's the underlying growth in what is here today. So yes, you're completely
I've still
correct.
got it, John. Look at that.
Assuming
So,
that,
is there any dissent on the panel? In other words, we're talking, by any stretch of imagination, pretty significant, dramatic growth.
A lot of growth and a lot of churn.
And okay,
I think that's absolutely right.
Dan, anything to add? Or
I just that so Netflix is the bigger player in the top 5 European markets. It's now integrated on all the set-top boxes.
why don't we skip seamlessly onto that?
Okay.
Why-
So, next question then. There's going to be lots and lots of growth. Next question. Netflix and Amazon in Western Europe currently dominate the market
Yeah.
in terms of subscriptions. How is that going to change over the next 3 to 5 years?
So, okay, well, I was just talking about that. So, so it's in the major European markets. It's pretty fully penetrated. It's not at the top, but it's getting close to the top. The other thing to note there is it's on all the major set-top boxes in those markets, bar a couple. But we're talking France, Italy, Spain, UK.
It's fully
Germany.
integrated only in Sky, Comcast, and now in DT. It's not fully integrated.
Yes, that's right. I mean,
That's the growth coming from, I guess. It goes to the point that more and more operators will fully integrate.
yes, I think it's on set-top box, if not fully integrated, on most of the major players. So. Amazon is the next biggest player, and there's debate around how many people use that or whether it's included as Prime. So, the market's pretty full for those big SVOD players. About 80% of Netflix's viewing comes from acquired titles. So if that's being pulled out and going into some of these new entrants, what does that do to their growth? So there's probably more to come, but personally, I don't think a lot more to come.
Okay. Ben, do you have a different view?
No,
You're the same? You think Netflix and Amazon, do you think, are inevitably going to lose share?
I think inevitably in the bigger markets, but I think if you look across all of Western Europe, you're going to see them continuing to grow. And certainly when you look at, whether you look at Poland, where you've got, I guess, Showmax and other local services, you're going to see them meeting credible opposition.
And what you see also that, especially the example Showmax has abandoned Western Europe. They're focusing on Africa now. So at the moment, when you look at a transnational offering, it's only Netflix and Amazon. There's only a few that have some sort of 2 or 3 countries that they're covering.
Bruce?
I think it's a bit of a point in time. I do think that, Disney and Fox, we could all scratch our heads, but you've got extraordinary talent in that organization, and depth and nous and the ability to market and the ability to build franchises and brands. I sure wouldn't underestimate them. I think Netflix is, they're down the stretch, they're flying, but they're building a mountain of debt. And if the street falls out of them for 1 second and that starts to dry up, they're going to have challenges and they're going to have to goose their ARPU and charge more. So I wouldn't say that today's picture remains as dominant as it looks like it will.
And briefly, Guy, just a quick word from you. We obviously have the 3 big US media conglomerates are all gearing up to launch services that they are desperately trying to not to describe as Netflix-like, but they all obviously have those aspirations. And I'm thinking of the AT&T service, I'm thinking of Warner Media, I'm thinking of Disney Fox, obviously, and I think of the NBCU streaming service with its sort of tiering. How optimistic are you about the prospects of these services in Western Europe? Obviously, there's no launch dates announced yet, and they'll go to the US first, clearly. But are these going to be big Netflix-like players in Western Europe?
You didn't mention Hulu.
We didn't mention Hulu.
over a certain time scale. I do think we're talking about a 10 to 15 year time scale for them to become established, large-scale players on a global basis.
Anyone more bullish? No one's more bullish. Good. Keep taking notes. We're getting there. Next, I think this is one I have to start with you, Bruce. So over the next 3 to 5 years, we've just heard Guy and Ben and the rest of the panel agree that we're going to see a lot of growth in the take-up of subscription OTT services. What does that mean for pay-TV aggregators? How different is your bundle going to look? Do you have any good news for Dan?
What's a great bundle look like in 25?
Yep.
I think a great bundle looks like the fastest fixed line broadband network in the market, augmented by 5G if required. I think it's operators paying significant. I think we have either 40% fewer channels or 40% less cost in a lot of the people we pay today because we have to retool. I think we'll have a full complement of OTT services, and a really good pay operator is going to be the best, and hopefully a very robust, modern, thought-through customer interface. And I think we're just going to be great aggregators.
So in a sense, your views for Dan, and I mean by Dan the sort of international multi-channel community, is mixed. You probably can take fewer linear channels from him, but you will be taking some of his OTT products if they're great.
Yeah, and I think we recognise that picture of there being fewer linear channels carried on these things. Not because, I think primarily because the linear model for some channels who define themselves as thematic channels gets more and more strained as things move towards on-demand. We don't define ourselves as thematic channels. We're fundamentally brands. We connect with audiences. We own our own programming, so we can move into those spaces. And to the extent there's been on-demand consumption that's disrupting linear, from our point of view, we're pushing into that space rather than that happening to us. So I think for us, the pay bundle 2025 looks like a good place for us still.
Annette, you've been working with Deutsche. What does Deutsche's view of a 2025 bundle look like?
So that you have unlimited data access, so that you can, whatever you want to watch or choose or play, you can use over that access product. And underneath is a storefront that we can pick from, and if it's Spotify, if it's Netflix, if it's Deezer, what we have already, or what we had already on the mobile side, it will give more flexibility to the customer and more sort of a la carte, so you build your own bundles.
Right.
But it all is pretty much important is the access broadband.
I'll just focus in on one thing because I think it's something that we underestimate the challenge of. And whoever can solve the problem of finding the thing you want to watch within a completely non-linear world, because even in a single non-linear service, it's a nightmare. When we move to a situation where we've effectively got hundreds of non-linear channels, or certainly tens of non-linear channels, that challenge is phenomenal. And I don't think it's solved by voice, which a lot of weight is put on. Voice is good to find something that you already know you want to watch, but it doesn't help as much with chance discovery. So whoever can solve that will have the best bundle, in my view.
It's a great point. I mean,
I was just going to build on that. I think that's something we haven't touched on. I opened with it as being one of the key things that's beginning to work for consumers, which is software. And YouTube TV, which is a US-only proposition, obviously very much in its infancy and built with all of the network partners and an array of the kind of what you historically describe as the cable channels. But actually, the kind of the component of it that has got the rave reviews from the users has been the interface and what the interface allows you to do. So, the difference between voice search on most services and then being able to say, I want to watch football, and the service finding you everything that you stored on your network PVR, everything that's coming on this evening, and everything that's available in on demand on services either that you're both that you're subscribed to and those that you're yet to subscribe to, begins to be a real breakthrough proposition. And I think there's a huge amount of road ahead of us on that interface and the product from the consumer's point of view.
I mean, I know what the solution is, and the solution is a voice navigation with emotional intelligence.
There's a terrible joke threatening to emerge from them. I'm going to not in any way state it because I'll be canned off the stage. Just quickly, Bruce, on Virgin. Obviously, you've been carrying Netflix. I think you were the first operator in Europe to do that deal, 2013, I think. You know a lot about how much time overall is being spent on Netflix, but you essentially have zero visibility of what inside Netflix.
By show, no.
No. And presumably that means as an aggregator, but your ability to make recommendations based on your observations about someone's consumption is massively reduced.
Great.
And do you see that situation changing?
Unlikely, because I mean, it depends how sophisticated we get, but Netflix certainly hasn't been embracing of that concept. But it almost doesn't matter, because we have, I think the fact Netflix manages their brand and their environment so well, we would love to get more integration and get that working, but there's challenges with that, you know.
Annette, you think it will change?
It will change because of this federated search, and that the consumer expect that they can search across different properties or franchises that they're subscribing to. I think Apple TV is a good example, and as I said, from Sky and from Comcast, they have integrated that. I think it's an expectation that you need to meet, and that goes also what to Guy said. Voice will not resolve everything, but voice will resolve in many cases also in markets, again, where metadata quality is not that great. So I think we have to do much more to facilitate all of these different services in an environment, and I think this is the real challenge.
And one very quick question about the US market before we move on. In Europe, most pay TV companies offer broadband, you know, pretty much everybody. In the US, obviously, the big satellite operators don't currently offer broadband, Dish and DirecTV. And I'd certainly talk to US execs who say, look, us cable players in the US market will be okay because we're basically just pick up all the subs as they fall out of Dish and DirecTV's products, and that's kind of the way the market will adapt. Is your competitive advantage, Bruce, now basically in the broadband network?
It's always been.
Right.
It's always been. And I think Sky has challenges. You know, I mean, obviously they have a DTH platform and they have an extraordinarily strong brand. Great entertainment brand. They spend a ton on marketing and they go to market very well. But part of their motivation into Now TV and where they end up going is to counter that, because ultimately DTH is not an optimal platform.
Pay close attention to that one. Right, we'll come back. Right, next bit of the puzzle. So, Ben, you talked a bit about this earlier. Commercial broadcasters like ITV and ProSieben are all piling into the SVOD game. Carolyn McCall has said it's an essential strategic priority 11 years after you agreed violently with her to launch a SVOD service. Are these things going to fly? Do you think by 2025, Europe's free-to-air commercial broadcasters will have carved out significant subscription businesses?
So this probably goes to the second half of my opening statement, which was everything has changed and nothing has changed, which is I think my worry for certainly for ITV would be that you've declared you need it to be an SVOD business, versus actually saying what do we need to do is to design the best, because the original version was going to include both AVOD and SVOD. And I think making sure that you've got a single proposition versus that being available somewhere else that runs the full gamut and allows you over time, as it's clearer and clearer what consumers will pay for, and indeed from your perspective, what you can monetize better via advertising, because you are the largest video commercial broadcaster, same thing for ProSieben, same thing for RTL in Netherlands and Germany, but allow yourself the freedom to not suddenly decide, oh my God, advertising, that was what we used to do, now it's all about SVOD.
And the sense, I mean, to navigate one's way from the ITV Hub through the ITV Hub Plus, which is the ad-free version, into BritBox, it sounds like a somewhat confusing user journey to me.
We'll see what they come up with. But I think that plays the point of where I think that's the mistake to be made, which is to try and decide that the future's all going to be SVOD if you're somebody who's today, well, for anybody, but particularly if you're somebody today whose business is in advertising. You know, there's a huge amount of road with programmatic advertising and a huge amount of upside for people who have traditionally been in a very different space of linear advertising models that if you're a ProSieben or a ITV, you would probably be taking some competitive advantage in that space with you on that journey.
The key is the mix, because think about Hulu. They make more money from their ad-supported tier than they do from their subscription tier. Yeah. So a mixed business model is where the industry is not necessarily evolving towards, which is what I was saying in my presentation about what's old, what's new is old again, etc., etc. So your question, are they going to be an SVOD player? Is that, you know, they don't need to make a transition, a full transition. It will be a part of their revenue story for whatever the shape of the channel group is in 5 or 10 years' time. But advertising will be still be a big part of that. And it's not a dirty word. It's an increasingly important mix.
Bruce, obviously Liberty has its stakes in some free-to-air
wish them
businesses.
well.
Sorry?
I wish them well.
Right, you wish them well. Am I detecting a slight air of cautious scepticism? Right. Good. Let's build on for the next one. So let's talk about the big pan-regional multi-channel broadcasters. So Dan, this is obviously your turn. How many linear channels do you think you'll be offering in 2025?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this before. Inevitably, as platforms are moving towards an on-demand environment, channels that are funded by, or have part of their funding from ads from linear, they're going to start to feel strained. So there'll probably be a natural, movement of some portfolios out. But broadcasters like, Viacom with Comedy Central, MTV, Nick, we control a lot of our programming, and that's being put to use with these platforms to move them into on-demand. So we're at the forefront with partners like Virgin, Liberty Territories of moving their experience into on-demand as well. So I think there'll probably be what we're seeing today. Netflix is on these platforms now. Other OTT service will come onto these platforms. There'll be a more on-demand experience, and some major brands will still be there. And we'll hope that's.
And I guess as long as you can maintain your level of investment in the content that you distribute, in a sense, whether it's channels or OTT products or whatever, are you relatively neutral?
That's right. So we, since let's go back to 2015 when I think Netflix announced The Crown and Amazon announced the Grand Tour. Since then, MTV's output in originals has gone up 150% in the UK. Comedy's gone up 700%. I think there were some stats from COBA last week that it's the Association of Commercial Broadcasters on the multi-channel piece. The spend from multi-channel broadcast is more than £1 billion now. So that's a huge increase since 2015. So a lot of the brands that exist in this multi-channel environment are investing heavily and staying relevant. Some aren't, but many are.
It is worth saying that if one spends time in the US, obviously you can from time to time hear executives with a slightly more apocalyptic view. In other words, I think they see the sort of gradual decline of the big, fat, high ARPU bundles. I will often talk to execs who say, John, we're going from 140 channels for $140 to 40 channels for $40, and my math suggests that's going to be bad for quite a few of us. Do you hear that kind of talk, Bruce?
Yeah, I think in concept people do. And I think if you look at a lot of the channel groupings, everybody's talking about the deal they need to remain alive. There's that narrative, our cousin. You're hearing about Discovery and CBS. I think it's a challenging time. And I think Viacom's doing a lot of interesting stuff. I think Pluto is a clever idea. Right. You have that content and trying to repurpose it and use it and try to drive revenues out of it makes sense. The evolution's going to continue. But I think everybody's innovating, which is key.
Okay, we're running perilously short of time, and we still have our audience quiz to get through. So let's quickly do the niche and thematic piece. Guy, if some kindly venture capitalist came to you and offered you 100 million euros to start a niche or thematic direct-to-consumer subscription OTT service, which niche would you choose?
Of these? Okay.
No. This is. Don't worry. No. You can pick one of these if you want. I'm not sure I would. But let's put it another way. How optimistic are you about the prospects for niche? A lot of people are talking about the kind of.
So firstly, it depends on the niche. So you can, if it's a very small niche, you can survive with very few subscribers. Your content costs are the gardening channel. Content costs are very low. It can keep a couple of people in a job, 100,000, 200,000 subscribers, that's fine. The difficult area is the next level up, where you're competing with the slightly larger services. That's where I wouldn't invest. If I wanted to go niche, I would go ultra niche, because one thing that we haven't talked about is what globalization does is allow very small niches to become quite sizable. And you can see that on the internet. So I'll give you one example. 20, 30 years I developed my own photographs. 20, 30 years ago when everyone shot film, hardly anyone developed and printed their own photographs. Now there's a massive community that film is dead of people who develop and print their own photographs, a niche of scale. And the globalization of SVOD reach allows you to do that. But the next level up, that's where I wouldn't invest.
Ben, YouTube is home to quite a lot of what could probably be described as relatively niche content. Do you see much sort of subscription potential down in the sort of weeds in the long
Usually,
term?
the example I gave earlier of WWF
Yeah.
would be a high-profile kind of global one. But again, the business model I'd attach to it would be secondary. What is for sure true is that the broadband wave that is hitting us means that there will be more and more successful thematic bundles. Discovery have just recently kind of upped their investment in a company called Global Cycling Network, who, kind of an unbelievable, now 130 people employed in just outside of Bath, who, it's not, if you like, the Tour de France type cycling rights. It's all bike maintenance, it's bike fitness, it's bike health, it's some of the smaller races, it's interviews with the talent. A hugely thriving, genuinely global, now in Brazilian Portuguese, in Spanish, in French and German. Same thing in the UK with Little Dot Studios, who have created a service around real stories, which is essentially documentaries. Documentaries, a genre that was deeply, deeply unloved, in particular deeply, deeply unloved and not believed in terms of its kind of potential in an on-demand environment. But actually, these are all English language at the moment, and predominantly UK produced, 2,500 hours of content that's got 500 million views on YouTube. So for sure, there are those niches of demand. Now, will some of that demand migrate from ad-funded to subscription? That will depend on whether the platforms build out the capability, and that's why we're developing things like channel memberships, which is designed entirely to allow people to decide where's the right balance? Where's the right balance for the niche, for the excitement around this area of content, whether it's gardening or cooking or hair or beauty or fashion or cycling or documentaries.
Bruce, is this kind of stuff going to make its way onto pay TV platforms? Obviously, it will via YouTube.
There already.
It will via
There
YouTube.
already.
But can you see it becoming part of the bundle that you're marketing, or does it have a home in YouTube and that's fine? I mean, you must have pitch after pitch after pitch of people.
I think it's going to be different type of presentation. It's not going to be the bundle as you're perceiving what the bundle is. And thank you for the plug for Little Dot, by the way. We love Little Dot. The niche I am interested in is alternative delivery models. And we didn't make a $100 million bet, but we made a bet. And I know there's a lot of cynicism around, but I'm really interested in Quibi. Now, I know a lot of people have views and whether it'll work or not, but I think really high quality content, mobile only, not mobile first, mobile only, focused on millennials, where people are really investing in innovation, thinking through the viewer proposition, high quality, timely, really taking it to a different level. It's an interesting bet. It's a high beta investment, but to me, that's the kind of thing that I would invest in to see if something really can capture. I think niche by definition keeps you in small numbers, and if you have an enterprise value like us, some of that's not all that
It's too
interesting.
small in a sense.
Yeah, but I mean, something like a Quibi is a really interesting play. We'll see.
Okay, our final question for panel then. So we have now arrived in 2025, and we've all stepped out, and we're looking at Guy's latest charts describing the landscape we're now looking at in 2025. What looks most different? What are the kind of observable changes we will really see in the pay TV market? Obviously, 2025 isn't that long away, and you were talking about 10 to 15 years later on. Annette, why don't we start with you and work our way down? What's going to be the most observable, noticeable change in the pay TV market as SVOD continues its inexorable growth?
I think a higher amount of personalized content, and that you have subscription or some sort of a billing relationship with someone who delivers content to you, and that's individual. It's more individual than it is today.
Okay. Guy?
I think I'll stick with the point that 5 years is very, very soon. Blink and it will be here. I mean, that's why we forecast 5 years, because you can do that with a reasonable degree of accuracy, because
who knows?
Not much changes over that time period. It will look very similar. More will be streamed. There'll be an aggregation challenge. Apple will either be a vast success or not, but fundamentally fairly similar.
Ben?
Yeah, if I was to single out one single thing that for sure will increase in the next 5 years. It's just going to be the increasing rise of streaming as opposed to at the cost of linear. You see it today in every market. If you look at the younger audiences, expect that to be the total audience in 5 years' time. I don't think that's overly ambitious.
Dan?
Looking from a content creator owner point of view, I think the market will more cluster around those who create and own their own content, but also those that can forge good partnerships off the back of that, much more so than today.
I think there's a opportunity to see kind of a roll-up of the free-to-air market. And it's really interesting that no matter what innovations happened, the free-to-air viewership on continental Europe is unparalleled. So something's got to happen there. They're all under pressure. They're having their challenges. I think necessity is going to make them do something really interesting.
Right.
We'll pay more for access than for content.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to turn and talk about your views. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to flash a bizarre prediction about the market in 2025 up, and then we're going to ask everyone who agrees to stick their hand up, and then put your hand down, and then everyone who disagrees to stick their hand up. And we'll get a sense of what you think, and then the panel will tell you if you are right or wrong. So we'll start with something easy. So by 2025, Netflix will have over 275 million subscribers globally around the world. I think their last declared numbers were 139.3. Who thinks that's a fact? Who thinks that's fiction? Lots of Netflix bears in the room. Guy, you're going to have a view on this one. 275 million?
I'd probably be on the fiction. That's slightly
It's
aggressive.
too high.
Yeah.
Well done, everyone. And sorry to those who disagreed, you're just wrong. Right, next one. Similar theme. Netflix, by 2025, will have more subscribers in Western Europe than the next three largest subscription OTT businesses combined. One caveat, these are some numbers from Ovum, so they're probably wrong.
And Apple's missing.
Well, today it is, but by 2025, you may have a different view. So, who thinks this is fact? Netflix will be bigger than the next three combined. Who thinks this is fact? And who thinks this is fiction? More Netflix bears. You have a view on this one, Ben?
No, not particularly. No, I'm looking at Guy.
No clue. Guy, go on, Ben.
I'd go for fiction again.
Fiction again.
Fiction again. Me too.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Especially with all the moving parts at the moment and new entrants. Yeah.
It'll be more competitive.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Right, now this one is definitely for you, Ben. So by 2025, BritBox will have more than 4 million subscribers in the UK. Who thinks that's a fact? We'll come back and ask you why in a moment. Who thinks that's fiction? Ben?
I'm probably not with the lady in the second row.
Right. Congratulations, you're all right. Does anyone think there's any prospect of 4 million by 2025?
I wouldn't think there's, 4 million's a bit toppy, but I think there is a segment for, there's great British programme being produced in the UK.
Yeah.
Huge appetite for it. You know, Channel 5 was the Broadcast of the Year last year and a BAFTA award-winning producer of content. We would like to feed into this.
Will you be joining BritBox?
Yeah, look, if there's a proposition there, we would want to be part of that. So the segment may not be as big as that, but I think there's got to be a segment there for a frictionless on-demand experience for the best of British content. So, that'd be a great
market
fact.
outside of the UK. I guess expat communities, people love British content, so it's not only sold here or being marketed here in the UK.
Yeah, if you wanted to count the US ones into that number.
And also Canada.
It's like extending the market definition. If you break down subscription and say, is it going to be, are we talking about monthly users across an AVOD and an SVOD proposition? But actually, critically, we're going to really know in the next 12 to 18 months, which will be contingent entirely on what ITV Studios and BBC Worldwide actually do with their Netflix deals. If Tim Davies says Netflix is no longer his biggest partner globally, then maybe this story could be true. But there would be a hit to the BBC Worldwide story that would be necessary to take. But maybe that's the right thing to do because you then own an asset.
Wait with bated breath. Right, next one then. So by 2025, at least 3 new global subscription OT services will have rolled out, each attracting more than 25 million paying customers. So, who thinks this is fact? a few. Who thinks this is fiction? I say, well, we have a split audience. Bruce, do you have a view?
Fact.
Fact, you're bullish about this one.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Guy, you're the same.
Well, I mean, you've got some massive players there. The world is a really big place. I mean, you've already got Netflix to, mid 100 millions. Hulu's got 40 million US subs or whatever. I mean,
HBO.
these are just so big. I just don't think that's a high bar.
Fantastic.
Agree.
Okay. Next one. At least one skinny bundler streaming service, a bit like YouTube TV in the States, for example, will have broken out in Europe, attracting 25 or more million subscribers. 25 million or more subscribers, I should say. Is everyone comfortable with the whole skinny bundler thing? Great. Okay. Who thinks this is fact? Who thinks this is absolutely nonsense? This is not. Okay. Again, I think split.
Don't we already have one in the form of Now TV?
I don't think it's at 25 million subscribers
Yeah,
yet.
not yet, but when it goes, it's launching
In 29 countries.
across, exactly.
Across
And
Europe.
you'd be bullish about it?
Yeah, I think, the word skinny bundle is, we think of it as a US thing, but I think we've got several examples in Europe already, Viaplay, Now TV, etc.
Yeah, where the pay TV goes into other territories where they don't have a broadcast infrastructure and launching then an OTT service. But also keep in mind, HBO has announced to go direct. So, and HBO has a huge brand recognition, not in Western Europe, but in Eastern Europe.
How's YouTube TV doing in the States?
It's great in the States.
Going well.
Yeah, but it's for us, that's
Early days, but
that's a model of partnership. Yeah, I don't see us being that by 2025. Right. YouTube TV, indeed, in many circumstances, I don't see us being a player for YouTube TV in Europe at all in that time frame.
Bruce, you're shaking your head. You're more.
But listen, I think skinny bundles had a lot of opportunity to flourish in the US because the pay TV bills are so expensive.
Sure.
The ARPUs are so low. I mean, our ARPUs outside of the UK, UK is a richer market, but when you go to the other markets, there's just not the headroom. So if you have a $20 ARPU, you're going to go to 14 and cut the content in half.
I think
I just don't get it.
I think that's right. I think Now TV has got great rights in the UK. It's got HBO Showtime tied up within that. It's got sport. How can the challenge for any skinny bundles, how you bring that sort of content into your offering that's not already tied up. So that's going to be.
And I think as well, we had decent broadband, lots of people who weren't paying for any TV.
Somebody's.
Yeah, that's my phone. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, jumping on. So we heard some skepticism about digital satellite. So by 2025, Sky will have turned off its digital satellite pay TV service in at least one major European market, shifting to IP delivery.
Wow.
They've already announced that they're launching, obviously, a sort of full IP version of a satellite service. Who thinks this is fact? One, maybe three people. Who thinks this is fiction? I think we should ask Julian, who probably knows the answer.
Okay. My money would be on Italy as the country they try.
Why? They have 75% is DVB-T already. They have only 10%, 15% satellite.
Sorry, Julian. What does the panel think? I mean, are we going to see this kind of shift from satellite infrastructure? We're seeing it in the States to some extent, but...
Satellite infrastructure is getting so cheap now.
Right.
I think we will, but not in this timescale.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's a longer term.
I agree. And I think, is there another market? There might be another way to ask the question, which is there a European market in which Sky will have a presence where it's entirely an IP-delivered solution? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But that goes back to the Sky Now, and you're saying instead of an OTT, you say you do an OTT IP, it's broadband, right?
It'll be backbook, but there's a lot of legacy hardware and commitments. So I just think in that time frame, I don't think it'll be unwound.
But the funny thing about satellite is you've launched the birds, they're up there. If demand starts to decline, then you'll lower the price and something else will use it.
68% EBITDA margin. Yeah.
There you go. Right, we have two to go. So the next one, by 2025, major pay TV platforms in Europe will have cut back the number of linear channels on their platforms by 40% or more. Jeremy Darroch, I think, was quoted recently in their the Q3 results call as saying that they were going to make some cuts. Who thinks this is fact? Who thinks this is fiction?
Will be fact.
Bruce, go on. Is this
Listen, I mean, that's a very specific target. So
Yes.
I don't know. I think there will definitely be a winding down, and there's going to be a lot of consolidation. Discovery Scripps got together and they killed a number of their own channels. So I just think that a lot of things are going to compress organically.
Okay. Anyone disagree?
No, I'd put it nearer to 20% if you have to put a number on it, but it definitely will happen to a degree, yes.
You subsidize in the OTT, you have to, something has to go for an operator. You can't maintain 150 linear channels and 3 OTT offerings in a bundle. So you probably cut down on linear and substitute that with OTT services.
Okay, and I think our final question, by 2025, Netflix will have been acquired by a major media or technology company like Google, Disney, or Apple. Who thinks that that is fact? 3, 5. Who thinks that's fiction? Who has absolutely no idea? Surely they're right. No. Does anyone think they're an acquisition target? Is it a viable business at this point in time? Yes?
Yes.
You've got 16 billion.
Google hasn't made a big decision as to where they're going to go. Netflix has that luxury right now of that growth trajectory, and the street's rewarding them for that. But they're amassing extraordinary debt. Does there become a bubble? Do the other competitors start to nip at their heels? Does it all get a little hard and somebody really big comes in as a white knight? I wouldn't put it as a absolute no, that's for sure.
Ben?
No, I think what was interesting, what Bruce said, is is there a financial issue that creates that moment? Because at that point, clearly, I think there'll be people who would look at it much more seriously. At the moment, the route we're going is we're just peeling their talent off.
Good.
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper, yes. Well, most things are at this point. Right, I think that is everything. Am I right that we have time for a couple of questions? No one's waving. Does anyone have a question, or have we told you everything? Is there any questions? There is a question back there.
Thanks, John. Simon Keelan from 3Vision, background in cable and IPTV operators. So, Bruce, to your point about the vision for cable in 5 years being the super aggregator, how much of that is reliant on integrated search and discovery? And will Netflix open up its metadata to make that vision possible?
I guess that depends on an extent to whether their contemporaries do. You know, if they get to a situation where they're not opening the kimono and everybody else has, then, I mean, I think out of necessity they will, but we don't really know how everybody else is going to play their hand. I mean, I find Amazon's presentation a little clumsy. Who knows? I think it's all going to evolve. You're talking 5.5 years. That's a lifetime in this business.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is all we have time for. I believe that there are some attractive alcoholic beverages awaiting, but I'm going to...
Just to say...
Why don't we do in that case, why don't we get out of the way? We'll say a big thank you to our panel.